Dear Mike, the last time we saw each other, I must have looked something like this. Back then, I thought my big cousin Nicholas would grow up to be a great gangster. And you? We spied on you once when you were working, but you remained a mystery.
He's an impulsive guy. He gets ideas and then he really pursues them on all 8 cylinders at once.
I just thought he was, I think he's, you know, I think he was a magical filmmaker. I thought he was, I felt very privileged actually to share an office with him.
And as an editor, he was a maniac. I mean, he would go into the film board and not come out for days. He'd sleep there and I don't know what he ate.
He was so committed to making a good film that he behaved in an obsessive way. You would call it an obsession. That he would eat, sleep, and drink the story.
You might wonder why I still remember you. I think it must be because of your stories. The stories which came to life at your fingertips. Once, I watched you painting a copy of a Van Gogh. You needed over 40 copies of Van Gogh paintings for the film Vincent and Me. They say you spent 8 months locked up in a basement to paint them all. Maybe this was how you did it.
You know, the painting is a big thing. Sometimes that touches on his film work. When he made Vincent and Me, it's because Mike is a painter. And Vincent van Gogh was great story material, but if Mike hadn't been a painter, I don't know that he would have gotten on to that story. He painted a lot of stuff. He painted landscapes and village scenes. So the village, for its anniversary, they put up a special label on a cheap red wine and charged a lot of money, and they used one of Mike's paintings from the village as their label. Because Mike, in his wisdom, had painted, I don't know, 50 paintings from this village, and he doesn't like to sell paintings, so he put them on the shelf in a local grocery store.
Let's see if your paintings are still at the grocery shop in Morin Heights. We asked the lady at the cash register if she knows Mike Rubbo. Of course, she says. A very nice man. He used to stand on the street and paint. When he comes back from Australia, he always comes to visit us.
I was born in Australia. I grew up in a nice family with lots of brothers and sisters. My father was a university professor and my mother was a painter. And then I decided to study film because I thought it was the most powerful medium of communication of this century. I didn't come to Canada, I came to the National Film Board. I knew nothing about Canada, I really didn't care very much about Canada, but I knew a lot about the Film Board and I thought it was a great place. As it turned out, in the 15 years that I've been here, I made a lot of films outside Canada because I knew quite a lot about Asia, so I made films in Vietnam and Indonesia.
In Montreal, we meet your former cameraman, Martin Duckworth.
I was the cameraman on Sad Song of Yellow Skin, which was shot in a cemetery in Saigon in 1968 or 9 at the height of the war. And it was a cemetery occupied by refugees from the countryside who were escaping from the American bombing of the countryside.
Tonight, we find that
the American people, I can say, from having campaigned the country, are terribly frustrated about this war.
Like many people my generation, I was very upset by the unfairness and illegality of the Vietnam War, just like people are upset today about the Iraq War, which is equally terrible. and we wanted to do something about it, but I decided I'd go to Vietnam and try and see the other side of the story, which was the life of the average person.
I wonder what it would have been like to grow up in Saigon these last few years.
And in doing that, I didn't know it at the time, but I was actually discovering a new genre of documentary, which was the personal film. But often, actually, the story on the side is very revealing too.
And he knows that we're exploiting him for this film. Keep the money for the movie. That's his parting crack.
No, you can't keep no septic money.
When he came to the film board, he was doing what was conventional documentaries. And he moved quickly through that, and he began, I think, by necessity, you know, and by being a creative thinker and smart guy, he began to put himself in his films, because maybe at one point, and I wasn't there so I don't know, but maybe at one point to make the film work he had to do that. You know, things were stalled, it was boring, somebody didn't show up, it rained that day, the car broke down, God knows what. But you know, he had to do something.
What Mike did is he came along and he actually insinuated himself into what was happening, into the story as a protagonist.
That method of making documentaries became quite prevalent after he introduced it.
That worked, and he developed that, and that became his trademark, you know, waiting for Fidel.
Your next project led you to Cuba. There, you were supposed to get an interview with Fidel Castro, but soon enough, the protagonists of your film became your fellow travelers, two eccentric Canadians.
Joseph R. Smallwood, who for 23 controversial years was Premier of Newfoundland.
And on the other side of the pool, Jeff Sterling, a millionaire and confident capitalist who also happens to be the co-producer of the film.
But Sterling is investing in more than just a friendly visit. There's been an invitation from Castro himself. The Cubans certainly seem to be expecting us. This fleet of Volgas,
Your stay in Cuba seems to be perfectly planned out. A luxurious villa, numerous excursions, a translator.
The interview may be a day or two, so in the meantime there are excursions to take.
And servants, who divine your every wish and your every word as well.
It showed how we were shut up in this house in Cuba. We were kept prisoners in a way, and yet there were many things that are inspiring about Cuba.
But Fidel just lets you wait. And so the film Waiting for Fidel emerges.
Something has gone wrong. The streets are full of color, but it's nothing to do with us. Honecker, the head of the government of East Germany, arrives to monopolize Fidel's time.
All this inspires Jeff, the stylish yuppie, to start leaving you messages on tape. Not everyone agrees with your experiments, and Jeff is only worried about one thing, the rating. He doesn't know that innovations take time.
At the film board, they accepted it because we were encouraged to experiment. But the outlet for documentaries in those days, or apart from, there were no videotapes and stuff like that, so you had to either show your film in a theater, which is very limited distribution, or get it on television. And the CBC steadfastly refused to show Rubbo's films.
And the interesting thing is a lot of his films stimulate arguments. They stimulate discussion. They'll be a bit provocative.
The thing was that Mike was really on the cutting edge. I mean, what Michael Moore did 10 years later or 15 years later is exactly what Mike was doing.
After 12 years of cooperation with the National Film Board, after over 30 documentaries and 4 feature films, you left Montreal. I am leaving Montreal now as well, and I hope the city has at least given me a glimpse of your past.
Well,